What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Swing for the Fences MLB show here on the Run Pure Sports YouTube channel, talking today's 11-game early slate starting here at 1:05 Eastern Time. Pretty early here in the Denver area, just 9 o'clock. Been up early, got the article up, digging into all these games, and I'll never complain about some early baseball. So excited to break down this slate. We've got Third and Schlong joining me today. Bryce, how you doing on this? Still morning over on the Eastern time zone. How you doing on this Wednesday morning?
Hi, I'm good. I love early baseball slates in general. You know, you just kind of have the rest of your day to kind of do whatever afterwards. Last night was kind of tough. The Kettle Marte home run to send it into extras cost me a good chunk of change.
Yeah.
So, last out of the night is always a little disappointing, but right back at it today. Really nice slate on tap, actually. 10-game slate with pretty good pitching options during the day. Might get some weirder lineups with some cheaper players that you can use to fit in some of these sets that we'll be talking about. So I like day baseball in general.
Me too. And we do have a decent afternoon slate and kind of night slate too. So if you're a baseball fan, you can certainly watch baseball all day long. If you want to keep playing DFS, I'll be firing probably all day long, depending a little bit on how the early stuff goes. And yeah, I was up there last night as well, but you really needed a lot of that Cubs and D-backs game. I don't think I was as close to you. Didn't come down to the last out. Baseball's like that though, man. It's a sweat usually, or often at least, until the very last out is recorded, right? It's kind of, there's no the unique thing about baseball as a sport, right, is there's no time limit. The games can kind of go on for however long and how long ever they take, and it's true for DFS too. There's no counting your winnings until the slate is over. So yeah, we'll try to get back to the winner's circle today. We, of course, will talk about all 11 games on the slate, and we will go game by game, as we always do. We do start out in Baltimore. We've got the Orioles and the Twins. Pablo Lopez taking the hill for Minnesota. We kind of know what to expect in general from him. He's had honestly a little bit slow start to the year. Wasn't great against Detroit or Cleveland. Did have a pretty good opening day start against Kansas City. I think he's pretty close to the same pitcher we saw last year, where he was a top Cy Young candidate. So a very good pitcher in Pablo Lopez. He's got a tough matchup here, though, against this Orioles squad. Obviously can do a ton of damage, starting to call up their youngsters, guys like Colton Cowser really coming through for the Orioles, and 7 lefties in the lineup for Baltimore. Lopez, not quite as good against left-handed hitters. So I do think this Orioles team, if you really want to get contrarian, makes for a little bit of an interesting contrarian stack. The Twins lineup will go up against Albert Suarez, who was just announced as a starter, I believe, this morning. He's like a mid-30s journeyman pitcher. I think he spent the last few years pitching mostly overseas in Japan, Korea. Not a high upside arm or a prospect or anything like that. He has had decent strikeout rates in the minor leagues, over 15 innings so far. He also did get up to 86 pitches in his last outing, and he is on schedule as well, that last outing coming back on April 12th. So I do think there's at least a chance Suarez can get through 5, maybe 6 innings if things are going really well against, let's be honest, a Twins lineup that has been absolutely dreadful all year long. Really nobody doing much hitting in this lineup at all. They lost Carlos Correa recently to injury. So it is a good matchup for Albert Suarez, and a 4K, Bryce. I got a little bit of interest. You don't need all that much from a 4K pitcher, especially on a big slate where, listen, there are plenty of bats, big, expensive bats to spend up on if you want to build that way. So I'm playing 150 on DraftKings. I will have certainly some exposure to Albert Suarez in the mass multi-entry format. But let's throw it over to you. Twins in Baltimore. What do you see here?
Yeah, game I'm likely to be under on in general. Player I kind of want to be over on here is Suarez. Just makes a lot happen at 4K.
Yeah.
Looks like he's stretched out enough as to where he can eat some innings. Now, I'm not really sure what to expect, and I don't think any of us are. But a 4K pitcher on this slate helps a lot to fit in some of these expensive bats that we want. So I'm more than willing to take a shot on him in tournaments. Pablo Lopez, more of a tournament flyer for me. I'll probably likely have more Suarez than Lopez, if
Me
we're
too.
being honest here. And then bats. I mean, I don't think it's the best spot for bats. I don't want like a ton to do with the Twins. I mean, they've just been so bad recently, and they're a really crappy offense, but they're cheap. They're going against a guy that you don't really know what you're going to get something from. So I'll probably be on them more than Baltimore, to be honest. Baltimore, it's just kind of seems like a middle of the road offense here on this slate. They do have some exciting young players, as you mentioned, but I think there are spots I'd rather attack than Baltimore. I'm still going to have them in my 150, but they don't really come close to making like a main team type of build for me.
Yeah, not a main team. I got 3 main lineups in the 150 in the mega mini max there. So yeah, the Orioles definitely won't be on any of my 3 main teams. I will be over the field though. I mean, a 2% Baltimore team against Lopez, who hasn't looked great. All these lefties, good place to hit, good hitting conditions in Baltimore. There is some slight rain risk in this game. But I do think this game will play just fine. I'm really not worried about that at this point. Just something to monitor and keep in mind. I wouldn't, just completely forget about it. But I do expect this game to play just fine. And honestly, I'm not going to have too many Twins, but like this Suarez guy could be really bad. I mean, I mentioned he has been getting some strikeouts. He's also got like a 6 ERA on the season in AAA. There's a reason, right? He was pitching in Korea and Japan over the last few years at age 30, 31. So yeah, I mean the Twins are cheap, and it is a pretty good matchup. So if you do want to go there, I get it. I just need to see some life out of this Twins team before I want to invest too much there. That's Baltimore and Minnesota. We'll go over to Detroit. This is the other game that does have at least a little bit of rain concerns. Again, I do expect it to play, but at least something to keep an eye on as we move through this slate. We still got 2 hours, of course, before lock, so don't know for sure on the weather. I do expect this game to play. Tarek Skubal pitching for Detroit here. Breakout ace last season. He's been pretty solid through 3 starts. All 3 of them were good. None of them spectacular. He has had a very easy schedule so far. Twins, Oakland, Chicago White Sox. Doesn't get a whole lot better than that in the early going here. And he'll get a much harder matchup, still not terrible matchup against this Texas Rangers team. They are missing some key bats. And yeah, Skubal, I mean, he is the real deal. He is my SP1 today. I think it's close between him, another guy we'll get to later on in the show. But I do like Tarek Skubal despite a little bit of a tough matchup. One of the reasons why, Bryce, really good pitching conditions here in Detroit. It's always a good park to pitch in, just really hard, a tough home run park for everybody. But we got some winds blowing straight in from center field. You're really going to have to get a hold of one to get it over the wall today in Detroit. And that can be one of Skubal's problems, right? He does challenge people with the fastball. We have seen him give up some home runs, already 4 home runs, 2 against Minnesota, 2 against Oakland. I think he should be relatively safe from those today. And that's the strength of this Rangers lineup, especially right now, is power. And so you kind of take away that due to the park and the hitting conditions. And I think Skubal is safe with big upside. So I'm in on Skubal. Dane Dunning, there's a bunch of kind of these 7K-ish pitchers who I think are reasonable plays on DraftKings. Dunning's one of them. He's not a high upside, exciting arm by any means, but he is a guy that's probably going to give you 90 pitches, probably can get through 5, maybe 6 innings. This Detroit team really not hitting at all either. It's a great matchup for Dunning. So not a guy that I'll be playing often, Dane Dunning, but here against the Tigers at 7,100, I think he's got a pretty good shot at 15 fantasy points, which honestly, I would sign up for that at this price point and get the savings to spend up for an ace or better hitters. So I like both these pitchers. Pretty much out on the offenses in this game. Where do you stand between the Tigers and the Rangers?
Yeah, easily my least favorite game for offenses.
Yeah.
I don't see myself having any primary stacks. I'm not going to take them out of the pool. Like they might be in some one-offs or like last piece in type of scenarios and the optimizers, but not. I can't really talk myself into hitters here on a 10-game slate. As you said, the weather's really bad for hitting. Two pretty solid real life pitchers, and on Scooball's side, he's a really good fantasy pitcher. Guy just racks up Ks.
Yeah.
Texas, their main thing is power, and he, as you said, like that's his weakness. But the park should eliminate a good amount of that today. The only thing that would really get me off Scooball here is like if I think there's going to be an in-game delay, like earlier in the game. So whether it's something to keep an eye out for. I haven't like looked into it a ton, just simply because I do it normally like right before the slate. But to me, at first glance, I pulled it up when you were talking, and I think it's going to be fine. But if something pops up like on the radar before the game, that's something to keep an eye on. We'll have you covered in Discord for like more up to lock concerns like that. On the other side, Dunning, I think I'd much rather play him than like a Pablo Lopez type of guy today. So I don't think he has the most upside in the world, but I think he can grind his way to 20 here for sure. I wouldn't worry too much about Dunning. He seems like a pretty safe option today with decent upside compared to what he normally has. This Tigers lineup will strike out, so I don't mind him. Scooball is my number one pitcher of the day as well. If we just throw out any weather concerns that there might be.
Yeah, like you said, the offense just doesn't make sense. You're not going to stack either of these teams, or at least I wouldn't. And then just such a tough park for home runs today that one-offs don't make a lot of sense. So I think I'll be maybe just kind of Xing out both of these offenses. I did kind of pull up the weather report too. Maybe a little more risk than I was anticipating. Looks like perhaps some thunderstorms moving in, an hour and a half or maybe 2 hours into the game, which honestly, most pitchers are done by that time anyway.
I'd feel better if it doesn't start in a delay, because I do see storms coming in like later in the game. So like if it starts in a delay and like they try to play like delay and then play before the storm, I could see that messing with the pitchers. So it's something to keep an eye on heading up to log.
Yeah, we're just gonna have to pay attention and make that call closer to lock. It is obviously one of the first games of the day, and I do think it'll probably be okay, but can't ignore that situation. So of course we'll be in the Discord giving our final call on Tarek Skubal, because it is an important call. He is both of our SP1s, and obviously if you lose your pitcher 3 or 4 innings into the game, certainly not ideal. We've got Steve Boynton in chat. He's fired up. Mega win here in Chicago. We'll get to that in a moment. But first, let's get to San Diego and the Milwaukee Brewers. I think you'll get some ownership here on Michael King. I'm just seeing now. Looks like Freddie Peralta not going to pitch. He was scheduled to go. They've got I've seen Bryce Wilson might make the start for the Brewers, which would change things a lot. I did like Peralta. Again, I'm not quite sure what's going on here. I do like Peralta a little bit if he pitches. Don't love the matchup against the Padres, but Peralta's been so good early on this season that he's got to be in play, at least on DraftKings. What is he, like 11-2 or something on FanDuel? I don't think I would get to that price point, but on DraftKings at 9,300, if he's in there, I think he's a good play. If Bryce Wilson is in there, the Padres stack suddenly becomes pretty interesting. Bryce Wilson pretty bad, and then it would be kind of a bullpen game from the Brewers, I assume. Michael King goes for the Padres, seeing some love from chat on Michael King. I don't hate that. He's been solid so far. He's had kind of tough matchups, 2 against the Dodgers, 2 against San Francisco. Both are lefty-heavy teams. I don't love picking on this Brewers team, though. I know Dylan Cease was pretty solid against them last night. And King at 7K, certainly a reasonable play. I kind of throw him in the Dane Dunning. We'll talk about Steven Matz. There's several of these kind of 7K pitchers that are solid today. Paul Blackburn. And I kind of have Michael King in that group. I just like the matchup less for him than those other guys. I do think he's a little bit better pitcher than the Dunnings and Matzes of the world. But I'm probably not going to play a ton of Michael King. I do think, looking at ownership, yeah, he should be reasonable. Maybe 10% owned, something like that for Michael King. So I think that's a fine play. I'm probably personally going elsewhere. And it does look like Peralta, I believe, has been officially not starting this game. So should be Bryce Wilson. And yeah, Padres, I wasn't really on, but I'll have to reconsider that. What do you got here, Bryce, for us? Padres and Brewers.
These games in Milwaukee are always kind of tough to me, like with middle of the road starting pitchers and two like decent offenses. I think I'd rather be over on the bats compared to the pitchers here in general. I think the Padres have been a pretty good, like under the radar stack so far this year, especially when they're on the road and out of Petco. So, it's a pretty big park upgrade for them against a pitcher that, I don't love. It looks like it's going to be Bryce Wilson. I hadn't looked into the Padres tons just because, up until 5 minutes before the show, I thought it was Freddie Peralta starting as well. So, I think everything's adjusted for that now. What I don't get about the Padres is why they're hitting Profar third. I know he's had a decent start to the season, but, it seems bad to bat him in front of like Manny Machado and whatnot. So, I just always kind of question his upside. They've been sack bunting him in weird spots too. I don't really get what they're doing there, but I do kind of like this Padres stack. I like it a little more for secondaries than five mans, but you can kind of include all encompassing, like, Tatis, Machado are obviously like the big guns here. And then like the rest of the team is pretty cheap to fill in with the rest of it. So I do like the Padres and 2, 3, 5-man stacks, whatever you want to do with them. Brewers, I don't like quite as much as the Padres. Prefer the road team here. As you said, they are kind of a tricky out. You get Bowers for super cheap here. It's a really, really cheap stack at the top of the order with Frelick and him. So I kind of like that as like a secondary type of stack. Don't love it as a 5-man, but I will be playing some 5-mans in my 150. Just not going to go overboard on them or anything. So yeah, I don't have tons of interest in Michael King here. Not really my cup of tea on this slate. I think there's a good amount of pitching to go to that you don't have to go to him. Now, I'm not like excluding him, but he'll probably be around 10% in my overall file. I don't love him, and it's not like a bad matchup, but it's not a great matchup. And I do think he has some upside, which is why I'm keeping him in, but he's not like my favorite player or anything.
Yeah, I'm with you on Michael King. Just kind of lukewarm on him, maybe matching or slightly under the field, something like that with Michael King. If you're playing multiple lineups, I would include him, I think. And then I'm with you. I wasn't really on the Padres at all, so I haven't dug into this matchup. I'm not sure how much I like him, but definitely the Padres stacks are in play. Assuming it is Bryce Wilson, if it doesn't go well for him, which it typically hasn't whenever Bryce Wilson has pitched at the big league level, it could be a pretty tough spot for this Brewers team. They used 5 relievers last night, so they're already a little bit gassed in the bullpen. Not a great bullpen anyway. And they did use, looks like their top 4 relievers. Bryce Wilson already kind of their long man. So it could get ugly here for the Brewers pitching staff. Again, assuming it is Wilson and Peralta out. I haven't seen Underdog tweeted or anything, but it seems like that's the case. So we'll get confirmation probably on that before we get off the air. Maybe we can revisit, but I do think this Padres team pretty sneaky. And maybe goes a little bit under the radar just because Peralta was kind of scheduled to start, obviously, up until just a few minutes ago, we think. So, yeah, on the Padres. Brewers are, I think, an okay contrarian stack, and Michael King, a reasonable play, but not a huge target of me, either I or Third and Schlong. Next game is Pittsburgh and the New York Mets. 8 total in this one. Mets sitting around minus 155. We have Luis Severino pitching for the Mets, who has been pretty solid through 3 starts, KC, Cincinnati, Milwaukee. So not easy starts, any of those. Getting a decent amount of strikeouts, has thrown an average of 92 pitches per start. So he can go give you the pitch count to get the strikeouts. He'll go opposite Bailey Falter, who has been pretty solid the last 2 starts. I'm not at all a believer in what Falter has. I mean, he's done it, so I guess I believe what he's done. But going forward, I don't think he's going to continue the solid outings that he's had. He is very cheap at 5K, but no interest in Falter for me against this Mets team. It would be the Mets bats that I would prefer, but kind of tough hitting conditions here at Citi Field. 60 degrees, winds blowing in. It's not a great hitting park anyway. I'll be pretty low on this game overall. I think I'll have some Severino. And then I do really like, as just a straight one-off, O'Neal Cruz atop that Pirates lineup. Severino gives up power, gives up speed. O'Neal Cruz obviously leading off. He's got both of those things in spades. So, yeah, I think O'Neal Cruz is an awesome one-off. But I don't love the rest of the Pirates lineup. Probably not going with the full stack. And then I'll mix in, guys like Alonso, Francisco Alvarez as well against Falter, who I think is pretty bad despite his recent solid 2 starts. What about you, Rex? Mets and Pirates.
Yeah, another game. We'll get to some of these games I like a little more here, but another game I'm likely to be under on. Definitely prefer the Mets side of things. I do like the O'Neal Cruz one-off call. Shortstop is always a position that I like to play one-offs at in general. It's just like, in general, it's like the weakest hitting position. I think it's a little stronger today with like Bobby Witt and whatnot, but we'll get to that game here soon. I do like Cruz as a one-off. Don't mind Severino at all. Don't really want anything to do with Falter. Like, I'm not taking him out of my pool, but I'd be surprised if I end up with him in more than like a couple % of my teams here. Just not a lot to love, and I think there's better spots to attack than the Pirates pitching or hitting today. The Mets, I do like to attack with left-handed pitching more than right-handed pitching. It's always nice to get Alonso against lefties, so he would be my favorite play in this game. But the Mets have not shown much upside this year. They're not a team that goes out and steals a lot of bases. They haven't been hitting for any power. It's pretty crappy hitting weather in New York. Likely to be on or under the field here on the Mets. I don't see taking a big stance there. Once again, this game's, if hand making teams, not going to make my main team. Fine with them as a secondary stack. I wouldn't advise playing tons of these guys unless you're playing 150. I would be fine with some Mets stacks, but I wouldn't go overboard here.
Yeah, Mets feel like they're going to score like the 4 or 5 runs.
Probably 4 or 5 runs, maybe a random home run.
Yep.
Just kind of like last night.
Yeah, one or 2 players that you might want in your lineup, but I'll be surprised if it's the Mets that, explode for 12 runs or something like that. It just doesn't seem to happen very often for that Mets team. Part of that is the park, and like you said, just seem like kind of a low upside lineup in general. But yeah, Alonso, Alvarez, kind of that right-handed power does look pretty good against Bailey Falter if you want a couple pieces of the Mets in your lineup. All right, we'll keep it moving to what I think is the best stack of the day, my number one stack at least, the Kansas City Royals, who have been awesome so far this season. They get Salvador Perez back in the lineup here, which is a nice boost for them. They'll go up against the White Sox and Jonathan Cannon, who I believe this is his MLB debut. This White Sox team, I mean, they're just not very good in any capacity. Yeah, MLB debut here for Jonathan Cannon, 23-year-old right-hander who had an ERA near 6 last year in AA ball. Has been a little bit better in just 9 innings this year in AAA, but 10th ranked prospect on the White Sox, which is not high praise for Mr. Cannon. I don't think it's going to go well for him here. He's given up a lot of power, a lot of speed. Base runners have had success against him, so guys like Garcia and Witt at the top of the lineup look really good. And the big story here, Bryce, is winds. Strong Chicago winds blowing out 20 miles per hour to left field, it looks like. Now, we do need to monitor that kind of up to lock, make sure that wind direction doesn't switch, which it sometimes can in Chicago. But assuming it holds, which it is projected to, man, we could see an awesome home run park. And I could see the Royals going absolutely crazy in this game. Cannon, also a guy who I think is going to walk a fair amount of hitters. Like I said, gives up steals, and then it's a great home run environment in Chicago. Bad bullpen, of course, behind Cannon with the White Sox. So absolutely love the Royals. I'll be surprised they don't do some serious damage. That 1 through 6, Garcia, Witt, Vinny P, Perez, Melendez, and Nelson Velasquez all look like awesome plays to me. I'm absolutely in on the Royals today. Singer pitching for the Royals. I wrote him up yesterday before that game got postponed. I think he's an okay option just because of how bad this White Sox lineup is. But I think I have other guys I prefer. Certainly Tarek Skubal. We'll get to a couple other expensive pitchers that you can go to. And there's some cheap options too. So I don't think I'm going to Singer today. I do think he's an okay option, though. Probably pretty safe, frankly, against this White Sox team. Where do you stand, Royals and White Sox?
One of my favorite games on the slate here. Really like the Royals. Echoed everything you said. The Royals stack comes in, cheaper than a lot of these high-end stacks that we'll get to in a bit in terms of what you're spending dollar-wise.
It's really just Bobby Witt that's expensive. Everybody else kind of in that mid 4K range.
And you can fit it. You can still fit in Witt with some of these value plays, value pitchers that we hit on here. I mean, they're cheap on FanDuel too. For those who are playing there, I mean, Vinny seems like a really solid play to me outside of the base runners. The guy's he's on a tear right now, and gets a huge park upgrade today with the winds blowing out. Looks like I think it's going to help every hitter here. It looks like it might help right-handed hitters a little bit more than lefties, but really like to play. This entire Royals team is in play for me today. They get Perez back too. He was day-to-day. That definitely helps out their team. I can even see like playing like a bottom of the order, like Adam Frazier type of guy to be a little different here. He's not like a prolific base stealer, but he can still run a bit. So I don't hate that play for super cheap. I mean, Witt is, he's up there with like Acuna and the Dodgers for me as like top overall hitter on the slate is how much I like him today. So I'm definitely be playing a lot of the Royal stacks. If you're playing a main team, I would consider them there. Playing 3 max, I would definitely have at least one Royal stack in there. So one of the offenses I'm highest on. White Sox, can't bring myself to 5-man them ever. I think it's worth like including them as like really cheap secondary options that can fill out the rest of your teams. But I'm never 5-manning this team. They're so bad. I think it makes more sense to like just take like extreme salary savings with like a couple of them. Gavin Sheets would be my top hitter for them today. Lefty going up against Singer. I think he's by far the best White Sox hitter at this point. So that would be my one-off on that side. And then I want nothing to do with Cannon. And then Singer, I do think he has some upside here. Anytime you're facing the White Sox, even if the wind's blowing out, it's not like it's Wrigley Field. It's overcomable. He can still strike people out to kind of limit the damage if he does give up any bombs. Hopefully there won't be guys on base. So I'll likely be over on Singer and over on the entire Royals team and probably over on Gavin Sheets. One of my favorite games to attack here.
Yeah, we have a similar approach. You'll probably play more Singer than I will, but I'm with you. Sheets seems like clearly the best White Sox guy to play, 3,400. First baseman with power, hitting third in that lineup. Seems like a really strong one-off, but I'm with you. I'm not going much further than Gavin Sheets, honestly. And then, Royals look awesome. I've mentioned it a bunch of times on the show, but Bobby Witt is absolutely locked in right now. Looks like he's made another step forward, obviously, from the monster season he had last year, just leading all of baseball in so many categories. I mean, hard hit percentage, barrel rate, number of barrels. Obviously, he can run and a great spot for Mr. Witt. I do think he is the top overall bat on this slate, regardless of position or price, given how good he's looked and how strong this matchup is. That's the first 5 games. We got 6 more to talk about. Of course, hit the like button. It does help us out. We're here early on Wednesday mornings. If you're watching the show, hopefully enjoying it, hit that like button for us. That's all we ask. If you do want to join us over at Run Pierce Sports, it's a good time to do so. Of course, got in the middle of golf season, NBA playoffs. Bryce, just getting underway last night. I know you're excited for that. I'm a little bit worried about my Timberwolves against the Suns. I don't think that's going to go super well for the Wolves, but I'll be rooting them on anyway. We'll have, of course, core plays, shows, all that good stuff for NBA, baseball, NASCAR, golf, MMA, everything you need over at Run Pierce Sports. You can use promo code DC15 for 15% off your first weekly or monthly payment. All right, let's get to the second half of this slate. First game, we'll talk about Atlanta and Houston. We've got Max Fried on the hill for Atlanta. Been a pretty rough start for Max Fried, frankly. Was better in his last start against Miami. Did get through 6 1/3 innings in that one. Just 4 strikeouts, though, against Miami is somewhat concerning. Prior to that, he didn't get out of the first inning in his first outing against Philadelphia, and then only 4 1/3 with 7 earned runs against Arizona. Although I will say almost all the damage did come in the first inning of that Arizona game. So it now has been like 9 1/3 innings of pretty good pitching from Fried. If you just kind of remove that first inning against Arizona, I do think Fried is mostly, if not entirely, the same guy that we've seen be, one of the best pitchers in baseball over the last couple of years. I don't like this matchup though for him against this Astros team that's really, really tough on left-handed pitching. So even at 8K for Fried, I don't think I'm going to go there. What is he, like 7,400 on FanDuel? I mean, it's hard not to be interested at that price point, even given the matchup. Interested to hear your thoughts on Max Fried, and then JP France will go for the Astros. He's absolutely awful. We stacked against him last time against Texas, gave up 8 earned runs. He's been terrible this season. Just not a good pitcher. And we'll obviously have to take on this Braves team, which I expect to do some damage. Astros bullpen a little bit worn out as well. I don't like the Braves quite as much as the Royals, but I do have them number 2 just in overall stacks. Of course, problem with the Braves is they are expensive pretty much throughout the lineup. You can get some cheaper values in the back end, but even guys like Ozuna have come up in price recently. So love the Braves, just a matter of affording them. You can do so, right, if you're willing to play an Albert Suarez. There's some other decent cheap pitchers that we've talked about as well. So you can get to the Braves. I'll certainly be doing it on a number of teams. Where do you stand on the Braves offense? And then Max Fried against the Astros, I think, is a pretty good question mark, especially with the discount we're getting on him today. Talk to us, Bryce, Astros and Braves.
I think it's a pretty good buy low spot for the Braves. I mean, they've just burned people all series here. JP France in a bullpen game, I think they're going to let him pitch, pretty much as long as he can here, but I don't think that's very long. So I think it's a pretty good spot for the Braves. I don't think anyone's going to be on them here.
Really?
They've just burned people all series. I think like Acuna one-offs will be kind of popular. And outside of that, I kind of think they come in under own. People are going to want to hammer the Dodgers. They're going to want to hammer like the Dodgers and some of these other cheap stacks. So I think the Braves are pretty solid leverage on this slate. People, they'll see their team total, go like, oh, well, that's the same as the Royals. The Dodgers are 4 run higher. And yeah, I just kind of think they could get lost in the shuffle a bit here, especially the 5-mans. I think people are more likely to play like Acuna one-off type of deal. Now, Acuna did get kind of hurt today. It wouldn't surprise me if he got a day off here. He stayed in the game.
He's in the lineup.
Seemed fine. Okay. So that definitely helps my outlook on the Braves here. Sorry, I hadn't seen the updated lineups here. Yeah, I mean, it sucks they don't have Albies, but it helps kind of stack the rest of the lineup for cheaper. I like Braves 5-mans. I like their smaller stacks as well. Not going to be playing any JP France. Moving over to Fried, him and Gossman are absurdly cheap on FanDuel. I think they're 100% playable there. On DraftKings, I'll likely have some, but not a lot. I'd prefer taking a shot on Gossman at home as opposed to Fried on the road here. If I had to choose between like the two like underpriced pitchers, not in really great spots, so I prefer Gossman to Fried if you're making like single entry teams and whatnot. In GPP, I'll likely be probably close to double Gossman that I am Fried. Is kind of like how I planned it out in my head before I built teams here. Astros, they can get it going against anyone. I always prefer them against right-handed pitching, or like crappy left-handed pitching. But if I was stacking the Astros here, I'd be sure to include like Jordan and Tucker and these lefties and hope they get to the Atlanta pen a little faster. It seems really bad to like exclude those guys from your stacks if you're playing the Houston side of the ball. And I don't hate Houston here. They've come in to me like super low owned all series compared to what their upside is, and I think it'll be the same today.
Yeah, Squid says what's scary about the Astros right now. I mean, they have the third lowest strikeout rate against lefties and the second highest WRC plus, fourth highest WOBA. I mean, they've crushed lefties so far this year. Looks like they should have their normal lineup. I mean, I think pretty much everything's, at least from where I'm sitting, scary about Houston. You'll get them extremely low owned, I assume, against Max Fried. I do think they're an interesting contrarian stack. I do also think you can play Fried, just one of those spots where you can play both sides a bit. Yeah, another thing that's funny, Bryce, is like, I don't know, before, projections kind of ruled over everything in DFS, people would be jumping off the Acuna train. They would have, like, already, we're almost 3 weeks into the season, doesn't have a home run yet. Price hasn't come down whatsoever, 6,500. And, he's going to be the most, it looks like, the most owned Brave on the slate. So I think, like, rightfully so, people not jumping off. I think that is, like, the right move. But it was kind of fun when you could get, these absolute studs who are just a little bit cold at, like, a reduced price or ownership. But no longer. You got to pay the full freight for Acuna. You don't get an ownership discount either. And I don't know. I'll take Bobby Witt over him, just given how each of them have performed so far. I do think once Acuna gets that first home run, I think they're going to come in bunches after that. But for now, at least, I would prefer to spend that top dollar salary on a guy like Witt, who is getting it done right now. Where Acuna, it'll happen for him, but so far at least hasn't gotten it done. I will, of course, have plenty of Acuna myself as well. Let's get to the next game on the slate. It is the Yankees and the Blue Jays. Kevin Gausman is, I think, kind of very similar to Max Fried, right? Where it just hasn't worked out for him so far. Obviously, a very long track record as an ace in this league. Was good against Tampa Bay. The Yankees start was a disaster. And then last time out against Colorado, I was on the Rockies there as well. I know JT Hayes, I think, had a big night stacking against Gausman. What's interesting is his stuff did mostly return. The velocity was back up from that Yankees start, but the results were pretty bad, honestly. 6 earned runs, 10 hits over 3 2/3 innings. He did get up to 78 pitches in that start, which is a season high for him. I think he should be pretty good to go in terms of pitch count. I would expect him to be around 90 in this game in most scenarios. And if you look at like the swinging strike rate in that Colorado start, it was way up there. So he got a bunch of whiffs that he didn't get against the Yankees. I do think the most likely thing is kind of normal Kevin Gausman is back, which, certainly puts him in play at 9K on DraftKings, and especially that $7,600 price tag on FanDuel. The matchup against the Yankees is not great. They are a super patient team, but there are plenty of strikeouts to be had here. Certainly Gausman, if he's his normal self, which I think is probably the most likely thing, I could see Gausman having his first breakout game of the season. Sounds like you are in on Gausman, at least on FanDuel. And then Marcus Stroman going for the Yankees. I almost never play him, especially at this 9K price tag, but don't really take hitters against him either. Does a really good job keeping the ball on the ground, keeping the ball in the yard, rarely gets blown up. So I'm kind of off that side of it. But I do think Gausman is interesting, and the Yankees are somewhat interesting too, just because we haven't seen Gausman pitch very well so far. It's possible he has a third bad outing in a row. Where do you stand, Blue Jays and Yankees?
Yeah, I've barely played any single entry this year, and I rigged single entry on FanDuel today simply to play Kevin Gausman.
Okay.
I think it's a really good buy low spot here. 7,600 is an absurd price. I don't think he should be anywhere below 9,000. I think a fair price for him would be like 10-2 on the slate, to be honest. He would be my SP2 behind Skubal here. Without Freddie Peralta on the slate, like in terms of raw projection, I think he's fine. I don't see anything that would worry me to the point where it's like, oh, this guy's broken type of deal. He's just had some really tough matchups this year. I mean, Tampa Bay and New York are tough, and he got smacked against New York last time. I much prefer him at home than on the road. I think he feels much more comfortable here. He finished third in Cy Young voting last year. It's not like the guy's a bad pitcher. His velocity's there. 7,600 is just too cheap for me. I know the Yankees are worrisome, but I'm willing to take a shot on his upside. Earned runs don't kill you as much on FanDuel. Like, I could see this to being like put a couple guys on base and then get a bunch of strikeout type of deal. On efficiency sites like DraftKings worries me a little bit more, but I don't think anyone's going to play him, just because if people are going to play him, they're going to play him on FanDuel. So I'm likely going to be over the field on DraftKings too. Now, I'm not going as hard after him on DraftKings as I would on FanDuel at 7,600, but just kind of where I stand with him. Hitters here, deep 150s. I'll definitely have Yankees and Toronto stacks. They have too much power, especially the top of the order. For Toronto, the bottom of the order for Toronto is just super tough to stack outside of like a random guy in your stack. So I will have both sides of this game stacked in case I'm wrong on Gausman and he's not the pitcher that we think he is, or something's going on there. But yeah, that likely going to be over Gausman and under hitters here in general. Pretty much with you on Stroman. He's a better real life pitcher than he is fantasy pitcher. So guys like that, I don't really actively target, and I don't actively target guys against them.
Yep, that's my exact approach with Stroman and the Blue Jays. And you're talking me into some Gausman here. I didn't include him in my write-up, but I do think I'm going to end up playing him, especially, 7,600 on FanDuel. You just got to have some exposure there.
Yeah,
do we know how long it's going to be? I assume
pitching drops off pretty fast after, without Peralta on the slate, after Skubal. I think he's kind of the clear-cut SP1 here. And then, I like Gausman at SP2. Ownership, I don't think people are going to go absolutely nuts on him, but I did my ownership. I did my ownership stuff before when they still had Peralta in, just because FanDuel's cheaper pitching isn't quite as important, just because the pricing of hitters isn't as efficient. You can fit in Gausman, Mookie, Ohtani, and Bobby Witt, and still have a really good rest of your team on FanDuel. So you could drop one of them and spend up more pitcher, which is kind of what I think people are going to do. So I don't think he's going to come in with ownership as to where it would really worry me too much. I have him right around 10%. So, hoping
Gausman and Braden Royals feels pretty good.
You can literally do whatever you want to hitter if you play him.
Good call there on Gausman. I'll certainly be getting some exposure, especially over on FanDuel. Let's get to the last four games on this slate. They are all over on the West Coast. First one, we'll talk about Washington Nationals, Los Angeles Dodgers. Dodgers big favorites in this one. No surprise, sitting around minus 250. They will get their MLB debut from Landon Knack, multiple pitchers making their jump to the big leagues today. Knack has been Decent in the minor leagues. Another guy who's stretched out pretty well. I think he can give you close to 90 pitches here against the Nationals. Nationals have been a little bit feisty this year. Not a complete pushover. They've been an above average offense a decent bit against right-handed pitching, striking out bottom 10 in the league, just a 20% strikeout rate. So, yeah, not a perfect matchup for Knack. He is cheap, though, at 6,500 on DraftKings, and then dirt cheap. I think it's the minimum price on FanDuel is 5,500 for Landon Knack. I don't think, Bryce, that he'll get through 6 innings in this game. I think it's possible, right? He's got to, everything's got to kind of be going his way. Could happen. I think he's in play, honestly, on both DraftKings and FanDuel. If you really want to load up on the bats, I'll say if you play him on FanDuel, make sure you spend all your salary, right? Like get access to hitters that other people can't get, because you're obviously punting the pitching there. So would be the one strategy piece of advice I would give. Jake Irvin pitching for the Nationals. I've actually played him in his last 2 starts. He's been pretty solid, 6 innings against both Oakland and Philly. I certainly would not do so today against this Dodgers team. I don't believe we have a lineup yet for them, but you know who's going to be in there. Bunch of studs, obviously led by Ohtani, and Betts up at the top. Just absolute killers. Freeman, Smith, Muncy, Teoscar. No slouches either. And then they did get yesterday one of their top call-ups. Looks like Andy Pages. It is pronounced Andy Pages, I believe. Didn't do a ton yesterday, but his minor league profile looks really good to me. Big power, some speed. I think he'll be in the lineup. He's 2,500 on DraftKings. I believe he's stone minimum on FanDuel. I don't think he was wasn't in the pool yesterday, but 2K over there. Another guy that if you want to spend on pitching and stack the Dodgers, assuming he's in the lineup, could be a good way to go. So, in on this Dodgers team, they're right up there with the Royals and the Braves for me. And, you can afford a lot of these bats with some of the solid, cheap pitching that's available today. I won't be going to the full national stack, but I do think CJ Abrams is a really good play at 4,600 with his power speed combination. And then I've been a little bit on the Joey Gallo train as well. Obviously, big power from him, 3 home runs on the year. He's pretty cheap, 3,100 on DraftKings. So, hitters look good to me, and I do think Knack is a reasonable play today. What about you, Bryce? Nationals and Dodgers?
Yeah, I could see like some deep Nationals tournament stacks here. Kind of like minis. Just going to get them out of the way here. Abrams would be my favorite. Kind of approaching them like the White Sox here, like as to where I could use like bits and pieces of them, but not really the full 5-man. Mm-hmm. So, I have some one-offs. I guess Mateo likes them. Not going to be a huge buy for me here. Someone's at the door. He always
does that mean he's in on the Nationals or out on the Nationals?
I think it means he's in. So I might have to up my exposure.
All right, we'll talk for Bryce here. Yeah, I think.
All right,
go ahead.
All right, I'm back. He always does that when I get the mail delivered. He is friends with the mailman at least. In terms of the Dodgers here, they're my top offense of the day. I don't think they're incredibly hard to fit in. And someone like Pages, against right-handed pitching, he's not going to get pinch hit. If he's starting against the same handedness, that's typically the worry with the Dodgers hitters is that, you're going to get 2 at-bats or 3 at-bats. You saw it happen last night. They do it every game with Hernandez. And, they can get there in a couple at-bats, but just know what you're buying. I think Pages is a much better punt than a lot of these Dodgers have been simply because he doesn't carry the pinch hit risk, assuming he's in the lineup today. And I hope he is because he's still in on FanDuel, 2,500 on DraftKings. He makes a lot of these expensive Dodgers fit. I don't think I need to explain to you why like Mookie and Ohtani are, kind of, 1A and 1B, like up there, best hitters on the slate. They're going to be up there every time they're facing, crappy pitching. So stack them up. I do have them a tier above, like Will Smith, Freddie Freeman type of guys, Max Muncy. Like I still like them, but they're not Ohtani and Betts. So, those are kind of the two Dodgers anchors I would look towards. And then, Pages cheap, filled out with a couple guys in the middle. I'm not different from the field here. Dodgers are my top stack of the night. In terms of pitching here for the Dodgers, Knack, I think he's a better play on DraftKings than FanDuel simply because, I don't think you need to go all the way down there on FanDuel because hitter pricing is much softer. You got some good quality pitchers in the mid tier. Now, I will have some Knack, and I would definitely fill out my salary. I think that was a really good point. You're playing him to get these players that no one else can do. You have like an all-star team. Like, I wouldn't play Pages with him, simply because you're punting him to not have to play someone like that. So, and that goes for FanDuel. On DraftKings, you still kind of need like a cheap guy with him. He's not, relatively as cheap with like DraftKings pricing structure. So, I'm definitely going to have some Knack teams out there today. He wouldn't make my main team, but I much prefer him to like the 4K Orioles guy punt. If you have the salary to get him, I think he's definitely a tier above him, and a tier below like some of the bigger arms. But you get what you're paying for, and he's super cheap.
Yep, I think he's a totally reasonable play today. I think he'll be okay. Unlikely, I think, to put up a big score, but at that price point, you don't need a huge outing. And if the Orioles guy gets blown, I think Knack is quite a bit less likely to get blown up than the Orioles guy. I do think their upside is pretty similar, though. So, yeah, Dodgers, if you can fit them, get them in there. Obviously, pretty likely to have a big game here against Urban and that Nationals bullpen. Last 3 games on the slate, St. Louis and Oakland. This one relatively quick for me. I think both Blackburn and Matz. Blackburn not in play in FanDuel for me at 9,300. Just can't get there. But at 7,600 on DraftKings against a Cardinals team that I do like to target, Goldschmidt and Arenado in particular just not swinging good bats. It seems like they kind of could be on the downside here. And yeah, I just don't really fear this Cardinals offense much at all. Blackburn really kind of unexciting pitcher. That said, he hasn't given up an earned run yet in the entire year through almost 20 innings. Now he's only got 11 total strikeouts, but he is pitching at home, good pitching environment, good matchup, pretty cheap price. Can probably give you 5 or 6 innings. I think you can do worse than Paul Blackburn for the A's. And then Steven Matz. I mean, he gets an awesome matchup against Oakland. The A's have the highest strikeout in baseball against left-handed pitchers so far this year. Matz obviously can give up some power, but frankly, the A's just don't have very many good hitters. Matz, you're probably hoping for 5, maybe 6 innings out of him. 6,700 on DraftKings. He's pretty cheap on FanDuel too. I believe he's 7,300 over there. Yeah. I think both these pitchers are solid. Not really going to bats in this one. What about you, Bryce? A's and Cardinals.
Right there with you. Game I'm likely going to be under on the bats. It's against Oakland. Like if Blackburn gets blown up, you get to go to their pen. So,
yeah,
I'm still going to have some 5-man St. Louis here. But that's pretty much the only interest I have in bats here. Don't necessarily love them like as one-offs as much as some of these other, what I would consider higher upside hitters. And then, Blackburn's kind of interesting to me just simply because he has a long leash, totally out on him at FanDuel at 9,300. Maybe like a 150 sprinkle, but tough to play at that price here. Matt's, has some concerns for me simply because I don't think he's going to go super deep into this game. I think 85 pitches is 85 seems like a pretty good number for him here. But he's super cheap, and you don't need, especially on DraftKings, you don't need your guy to pitch like really deep into the game. So I like both these pitchers on DraftKings more than FanDuel, and kind of 5-man only St. Louis stacks for me would be my way to attack the hitting in this game. Oakland one-offs, never really interest me. Unless you're going to get a a Shea three-run home run game again. I don't think that's coming anytime soon.
No.
I'd rather play like a Gavin Sheets, to be honest, as like a one-off than some of these Oakland guys.
Yeah, with you on that. I think Gavin Sheets a better play than all the Oakland guys, frankly. Let's get to Chicago and Arizona. 2 more games to talk about. This one obviously went crazy last night. Both guys burned through both teams burned through their bullpen. So we could see more fireworks late in this one. We do have 2 decent pitchers. Brandon Pfaadt pitching for Arizona. He's been okay. Tough outing last time out against St. Louis. He'll go opposite Jordan Wicks, lefty for the Cubs. Nothing special there. And 2 good offenses, man. Both these offenses performing very well early on. Arizona just crushing lefties. So they've got another good matchup. And then the Cubs are dangerous as well. The emergence of Michael Busch has kind of lengthened out that lineup. I think he's an awesome play against Pfaadt, who you do want to target with lefties in general. I like the offenses here, and I'll be passing on both Pfaadt and Wicks today. What about you, Bryce?
Yeah, not a lot of interest for me in pitching here. My one concern about playing hitters in this game is that, the Cubs are still cheap. And, after their offensive explosion last night, I think they might come in a little higher owned than they should. But, in a vacuum, I do like the plays against Pfaadt. As you mentioned, especially lefties, Michael Busch and Cody Bellinger are the 2 top plays here. I'd rank Bellinger ahead of Busch, but it's just because, I'm kind of a buyer on Bellinger for the season here. The only thing that worries me is, as I said last night, like how many runs they scored. I think people might chase that a bit. So, I'm still going to have a good amount of 5-mans and small stacks all across the board here. I think it's a really good hitting spot. If I'm picking individual bats, it would be Christian Walker, Cody Bellinger, Michael Busch. I think Gurriel's been hitting the ball really well. I want to see this Cubs lineup and kind of where they hit in the order here. But yeah, I think it's a pretty good spot for the Cubs here. I'm likely to be over on them. Unless the field just goes absolutely apeshit chasing their game from last night. So not really any interest in pitching here.
Yeah, I think we'll see some offense again between the Cubs and the Diamondbacks today. Last game to talk about, then we will go kind of talk about our favorite pitchers, stacks. We'll go back through the weather in Detroit, do plays of the day, all that fun stuff. But first, let's get through this last game on the slate. It is Cincinnati and Seattle. Andrew Abbott on the hill for the Reds, lefty, second-year lefty, Andrew Abbott, and then Bryce Miller for the Seattle Mariners. He's been very impressive so far. I'm a big buyer in Bryce Miller this year. And he's had pretty tough matchups against the Cubs, Brewers, and Boston. That was kind of a fully healthy Boston team at that point. Has performed well, especially in the last 2 games. Gets to pitch at home in a really good pitching environment in Seattle. The Reds obviously have a lot of high upside hitters, but there is also plenty of strikeouts to be had against them. I've got Bryce Miller as my SP2. Sounds like you might be going a little bit different direction, Bryce. And then Andrew Abbott, at least when I looked earlier, I was seeing some potential big ownership on him. I'm checking to see now if that has changed. Looks like a little bit, but he still should be, 15, 20% owned. I think I'm off of Abbott. He just hasn't missed very many bats this year. I'm a little worried kind of about him talent level long term. So probably a fade of Abbott for me. Definitely in on Bryce Miller, and don't love the bats here. I do kind of like the Seattle right-handed power. Julio is super cheap on FanDuel. I think you can go to guys like France, Haniger, Mitch Garver if he's in the lineup. But overall, not a ton of bats here for me, and pretty high on Bryce Miller personally. What about you, Bryce? Mariners and Reds.
Yeah, so I think Gossman SP2 was more FanDuel. I think Bryce, big day for the Bryces here. So he's my SP2 on DraftKings. In a vacuum, I'd take him over Gossman. So, Cincy is just one of my favorite teams to target when they're on the road. When they're in Great American Ballpark, it's much tougher, but, they have upside, but they also have a ton of downside. I I played a ton of Gilbert last night. Probably going to be playing a lot of Miller here. I like the Seattle staff, and I don't really have much belief in Cincinnati outside of their park.
Right.
So, yeah, that's pretty much it. They're a high strikeout team. I like Bryce's upside here. I don't think he comes in like absurdly high owned here as to where it would like get me off him. It's a 10-game slate. There's a lot of pitching options. I'm not really super worried about pitching ownership here. So yeah, I'm likely going to be a buyer on him. Don't really have any interest in the Cincinnati bats. If you want some one-offs, Ellie is always like one of my favorite one-offs. He kind of falls into like the O'Neill Cruz bucket for me as to where he's playable on pretty much any slate against right-handed pitching. So, if you're not playing Bryce or you want to attack Cincy, that would kind of be my way to do it. Mariners, I have a bit of interest in. I think they go completely unowned in large field GPPs. They're super cheap. Like Ty France is 3,500. It's not that hard to fit in guys like him, Julio, like some of the higher end bats here, and then fill out your team elsewhere. I do think Abbott has more upside than you might be giving him credit for. So, I'm not really sure if he's going to be 20% owned if I'm going to hit that mark on him, but I'll probably have between 10 to 15% Abbott here. I do think he has upside against this Seattle offense in a really good pitching park.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm just a little bit lower on him, I think, than the field will be, but I get it against the Seattle team for sure. Strikeouts to be had. Yeah. Well, I'll answer a couple of these questions, Bryce. We'll throw it over to you for stacks here in a minute if you want to look at what you're going to. Any Class A love? Yeah, I assume that's Jonathan Class A for the Mariners, rookie speedster, 2,200 on DraftKings. I assume he's cheap on FanDuel as well.
He is.
Yeah, 2K. Yep. So both him and the Dodgers guy, Andy Pajes, are really good punt plays on both sides once again today, assuming they're in the lineup. A couple other questions. How's the weather holding up for Skubal? I think it's more optimistic than we were an hour ago when we were discussing that game. I think it's essentially a stone lock to start on time. And then looks like scattered thunderstorms could be moving in, 2 hours probably into the game, which Skubal should be mostly done pitching at that point anyway. So I'm leaning not moving off my Skubal. Of course, we still have an hour to go, but that's my lean as of now. Severino or King, I'm kind of lukewarm on both those guys. I'll have some exposure, but, maybe 5 to 10% each. DC fading Pablo Lopez. Yes, I don't really want to pick on this left-handed heavy Orioles squad right now. All right, let's get to some of the fun stuff, Bryce. Your favorite overall stack and then a favorite contrarian stack you're looking at.
Favorite overall stack? God, it's hard for me to get off the Dodgers, but them and the Royals are kind of like right below them for me. Favorite off-the-wall stack here? Going to go with the Padres.
Yeah, Royals are my number one. Braves and Dodgers kind of right behind them. Again, that's not breaking any news, but that is how I feel about it. And then off the wall stack, I will go with the 1 or 2% owned Baltimore Orioles. I think they're capable of going off against any pitcher, including Pablo Lopez, and a good park to hit it in Baltimore for left-handed bats as well. Who do you think will be your most important pitcher today, Bryce? I think I've got a good idea who it might be.
Well, it's going to be Gausman.
Yeah,
I'm playing him on my main team. So, and I'm playing FanDuel for my main team. So, there you guys go.
Yeah, Kevin Gausman. Totally get it. I think mine will be Bryce Miller. You do get a little bit of a discount from Skubal. I'm going to have honestly more pitchers than I usually do in my pool. A bunch of these kind of 7K guys I think are in play. I like the high-end options pretty well. Gausman is an interesting play there. And then even the cheap guys, I'm willing to play some Albert Suarez, some Landon Knack, Matz, Dunning. I mean, all these guys, Blackburn. I'll be spreading it around more than usual at pitcher today for sure. Give us a home run call, Bryce. Maybe a one-off on a team that you're not going for a super stack on.
I'll go Cody Bellinger.
like the Bellinger call. I will go with O'Neal Cruz off of Luis Severino. Not going to load up on the Pirates, but absolutely love O'Neal Cruz as a one-off today. And finally, Bryce, your overall play of the day from the hitting side.
Overall play of the day, we'll go with I'm going to go Ohtani. I'll leave Witt to you. It's pretty close between the two for me.
Yeah, you got it. Bobby Witt, he's going to have a monster day here, power and speed against Jonathan Cannon and that White Sox bullpen. All right, that'll do it for this show. We appreciate you guys tuning in. Hit the like button on the way out if you haven't yet done so. We got baseball going on all day, so I'll have cores for the afternoon and kind of main late slate as well. And then I believe we have another early slate tomorrow. So I think the show should be back at the same time it was today, 11 Eastern time, I believe. Kind of a shorter slate, but I think we'll have a show. So yeah, hopefully we will, and join us for that if we do. That'll do it for this show. Thanks for watching for Third and Schlong. I am Draft Cheat, and we're out of here.